All right, everyone, welcome. In this explainer, we're going to dive right into the fascinating world of one of the body's most vital proteins. We are going to trace the entire life story of hemoglobin, a real workhorse of our circulatory system.
You know, this quote really sets the stage perfectly. Hemoglobin's life is just a perfect example of metabolism in action. It's built up, that's anabolism. It goes out and does its incredibly important job, and then eventually it's broken down, catabolism. So let's follow that journey from start to finish.
Okay, so let's start right at the beginning. To make this super easy to remember, I want you to think of hemoglobin as our body's essential oxygen taxi. Seriously, this little analogy is going to help us understand its structure and its function so much better.
Okay, so we all get that its main job is shuttling oxygen around, right? But, and this is super important, to really get a grip on how it works, and even more importantly what goes wrong in disease, we've got to understand how this taxi is built. So let's break down its structure step by step.
So first up, you've got the protein part, the globin chains. Just picture this as the actual frame of our taxi. It's built from 4 separate polypeptide chains, and in adults, we're talking 2 alpha and 2 beta chains. Their whole purpose is to create a nice, stable structure to hold the really important part, which is the heme group. Okay, now this is where it gets really cool. If globin is the taxi frame, heme is literally the passenger seat. Each one of those 4 globin chains gets its own heme group, and right in the middle of each heme is an iron atom. And that iron, that's what actually grabs onto an oxygen molecule. So one hemoglobin taxi has 4 seats ready to pick up 4 oxygen passengers. And right away, this brings us to a super important clinical link. Making this heme group is a pretty complex multi-step process with a bunch of enzymes. Well, if any of those enzymes are faulty, you can end up with a group of genetic disorders called porphyrias. It's a perfect example of how one little problem in building the passenger seat can cause some really serious diseases.
Okay, so our taxi's built. Now let's see this thing in action. We're going to explore how it so masterfully picks up and drops off its precious oxygen cargo. Because get this, it's not enough to just hold oxygen. The real genius is knowing precisely when and where to drop it off.
And how does it do that? Well, its ability to change shape is basically its superpower. It's got 2 forms. In the lungs, where there's oxygen everywhere, it snaps into this high-affinity relaxed or R form. It just loves to pick up oxygen. But then, when it gets to the tissues that are starving for oxygen, it switches to the low-affinity tense or T form, which makes it let go of that oxygen. Pretty smart, huh?
So you might be wondering, what's this signal? What tells hemoglobin to switch into that drop-off T form? So just take a second here and look at this table. These are the key signals. Think about it. In tissues that are working hard, you're going to have more CO2, more acid, and a higher temperature. Well, these things, plus this molecule called 2,3-BPG, all scream at hemoglobin to release its oxygen. And a great way to remember this is the mnemonic CADET, where the letters stand for CO2, acid, DPG, exercise, and temperature. But what happens when our hero, our oxygen taxi, breaks down? A defect in the taxi itself can have absolutely devastating consequences, and that's when we run into a whole class of genetic diseases called the hemoglobinopathies.
And a classic example, the one you've definitely heard about, is sickle cell anemia. It is the perfect illustration of how one tiny error in the genetic code, a single missense mutation, can have these massive clinical effects.
So what's the deal here? It all comes down to one single amino acid swap. A water-loving glutamic acid gets switched out for a water-fearing valine. This tiny little change causes the deoxygenated hemoglobin molecules to start sticking together, polymerizing into these long, stiff rods. And those rods are what distort the red blood cell, forcing it into that sickled shape that can clog up tiny blood vessels.
But wait, here's where things get really fascinating from an evolutionary standpoint. People who have just one copy of the sickle cell gene, what we call the trait, they're actually protected against malaria. It turns out the malaria parasite has a really hard time surviving inside those sickled cells, which the body tends to clear out more quickly. Amazing, right? Now, if sickle cell is a quality problem, a defect in the protein itself, then thalassemias are a quantity problem. In this case, the body just doesn't make enough of one of the globin chains, either the alpha or the beta. This throws the whole system out of balance, leading to messed up red blood cells and, you guessed it, severe anemia.
All right, so after about 120 days of hard work, our red blood cells and the hemoglobin inside them
finally reach the end of the line. They get pulled out of circulation and broken down, mostly in the spleen. So let's follow this last chapter of hemoglobin's life, which is clinically super important to understand.
Okay, this breakdown pathway is absolutely essential to know. As you can see, the whole process starts with breaking open that heme ring. The iron gets recycled, which is great, but the ring itself gets converted first to a green compound called biliverdin and then to a yellow-orange one called bilirubin. Now, this first version of bilirubin is unconjugated, which just means it's fat-soluble and the body can't get rid of it easily. So it hitches a ride to the liver, which is basically our body's processing plant. The liver sticks a molecule onto it, we call that conjugation, which makes it water-soluble, and only then can it finally be excreted from the body in our bile.
And understanding this pathway is just so useful in the clinic. Jaundice, that yellowing of the skin and eyes, is all because of high bilirubin levels. The whole game is figuring out where the breakdown is happening. We can use a lab test called the Van den Berg reaction to see if the extra bilirubin is the fat-soluble unconjugated kind or the water-soluble conjugated kind. And as this table shows, that tells us exactly what's going on. Is it too many red blood cells breaking down? Is there a blocked bile duct? Or is the liver itself damaged?
All right, you ready for a quick quiz? Let's try to lock in these concepts with a couple of clinical scenarios. See if you can connect the dots. Ready?
Okay, first scenario. A patient comes in with really bad pain in their joints and abdomen and gets diagnosed with a sickle cell crisis. What is the fundamental, the absolute core molecular event that's causing their red blood cells to change shape and block up their blood vessels?
All right, scenario number 2. A patient has jaundice. You run some labs, and they come back with a really high level of unconjugated or indirect bilirubin in their blood. Based on that pathway we just talked about, what's the most likely type of jaundice here? Think about it. Is the problem happening before, during, or after the liver?
Okay, got your answers? Let's see how you did. For question 1, the answer is the polymerization of deoxygenated hemoglobin S. For the second one, that high unconjugated bilirubin points straight to hemolytic jaundice, where red blood cells are being destroyed way too fast for the liver to keep up. Excellent job if you got those right. These are exactly the kinds of connections you're going to be making all the time.
And there you have it, the complete life story of hemoglobin, from beginning to end. Keep going over these pathways, keep connecting the basic science to the clinical picture. By doing this, you're building such a fantastic and solid foundation for your entire medical career. Great job today.